Good morning, I'm Alejandro Clemente, and I will present the work done for the Heiseltech 2022 conference, which is experimental validation of a vanadium redox battery model via particle sum optimization. This work has been done jointly with the LiftTech Physics Center. This is the outline that I will follow during this presentation. First of all, I will introduce the concept of a redox flow battery and the main existing models in the literature. Then I will present the model that has been formulated in this work and has been used to analyze and develop an experimental setup to calibrate and validate this model. Finally, I will present the main results and conclusions obtained. So, vanadium redox flow battery is an energy storage system whose principle of operation is based on the chemical redox reaction that is present here. As can be noticed, there are 4 different species of vanadium, which are V2, V3, and V4 and V5 that exist as oxides of vanadium. And on the right, you can see a figure of the main schema of any redox flow battery. As can be seen, it is composed of different parts. On the one hand, we have the current collectors that allow the pass of current through the cell stack and makes possible to distinguish between the 2 sides, which is the catalyte and anolyte side. For the case of a vanadium redox flow battery, the catalyte is composed by vanadium species V4 and V5, and for the case of the anolyte, with vanadium species V2 and V3. The membrane has a function of separate both half cells, allowing the pass of current, so the pass of electrons, but not allowing the pass of the different vanadium species from one side to the other side. Then we have the electrode whose function is separate continuous cells, and in this way making possible to obtain a stack of different cells that makes possible to increase the power of the system. The tanks are the part of the system where the electrolytes are stored and is directly related with the energy that is stored inside the system. The pump has a function to inject the desired flow rate along the system, making it flowing and passing from the cell to the tank in a cyclic way. And finally, we can find the power source or load that can be seen as injection or extraction of current into the battery. So inside the literature, there exist different models of a vanadium redox flow battery that can be mainly classified in 2 types. On the one hand, the distributed parameter models that are used to analyze components, the material, or different effects such as the degradation or the flow design. The main disadvantage of this type of models is that they have a high complexity and computational cost. For that reason, they need a specific and robust software developed, as for example, the use of control multiphysics. On the other hand, we can find in the literature the use of lamp parameter models that has a function of define easy models based on some assumptions. It is usually used to develop control purposes and control strategies, and also these type of models are used to calibrate different types of batteries and obtain the estimation of different variables and parameters, as can be seen the state of charge or the state of health. The main disadvantage of this type of models is that it requires the use of hypotheses to relax the problem. And some tools that can be used to define a lamp parameter model are the MATLAB and Simulink environment or the Maple software. So inside the use of lamp parameters models, there exist different models for the vanadium redox flow battery that considers different phenomena. On the one hand, we can find the electrochemical model, whose function is define the behavior of the chemical species inside the battery. In this case, it allows to present the evolution of the vanadium or the protons and water ions species inside the battery. This type of models, electrochemical models, are used to design different estimators, as can be seen the state of charge and state of health estimators. Another model that appears frequently in the literature is the thermal model, whose variable is the temperature, and it makes possible then to analyze the evolution of this temperature along all the system and in the different parts, not only in the cell, but also on the pipes, on the pumps, and on the tanks. In this way, by means of this model, it is possible to analyze if a heat exchanger is needed to guarantee the correct and safe thermal operation. Another model is the hydraulic model, whose variable is the pressure. So it is used to determine the pressure drops along the system. And in this way, it is possible to study and analyze the different flow designs, and in this way, the correct selection of the proper pumps. Finally, one of the most important models is the voltage model, that makes possible to determine the voltage profile that is obtained for any type of battery. In this case, it uses, as will be seen, it uses the Nernst equation, but also it must be determined. It's important to determine the different overpotentials, such as the activation, the concentration of the ohmic overpotentials, and in this way, this variable is used as a measure of quality of different estimators, as for example, the state of charge and state of health estimators. So the aim of this work is to propose a general model developed in the MATLAB Simulink environment as a tool to analyze the performance of a vanadium redox battery in a wide range of possibilities, consider the different phenomena that has been previously explained. In this way, we make two important points and two clear distinctions. On the one hand, we make a clear distinction between the catholyte and anolyte part, so we don't consider that the system is balanced with the same species concentration and in both parts, and also we distinguish between the cell and tank parts. This is not the most frequently assumption used, because in the literature most of the studies don't distinguish between cell and tanks and assumes that the electrolyte flow rate are high enough to guarantee that the concentration of a species is the same in all parts of the system. In this case, the evolution of the species inside the system, we not only consider the vanadium species, but also the protons and water ions. And as I have explained, we have used a different model that appears in the literature to consider not only the voltage, but also the temperature, the pressure, and in this way, obtain the possible state of charge and state of health of the system. So now I will present the model formulation, and I will present for each one of the models the different equations that we have used. For the case of the electrochemical model, the model that we use is based on the works of Skilas Kazakos with some improvements. As I said, in this work, we make a distinction between the anolyte and catholyte sites, and also between the cell and tank parts. We also include the hydrogen and water ions, and we not only consider the diffusion method of a ion transport method, as is the one that Skilas Kazakos always determine, but we also have considered different other ion transport methods, as for example, the migration and the convection. Here we can present in a general way the different differential equations that describe the evolution of the vanadium species concentration in both cell and tank, considering the ion transport methods that I have explained. For the case of the thermal model, we have used a model which is possible to consider temperature in all different parts of the system. So in the cell and in the different pipes and tanks, taking into account the ambient temperature, so the temperature of the air. And in this case, we consider the most important effects, as can be seen, the enthalpy and the entropy properties, the heat generated in the pumps, that is directly obtained from the hydraulic model that I will present in the next slides. Here, for the hydraulic model, we are able to determine the pressure drop in different parts of the system. On the one hand, inside the pipes, and on the other hand, in the cell stack, which can be the most important effects occurs on the flow frames and on the electrodes. With the use of this model, it's possible to determine the power generated by the pumps, which is the one used in the previous section to determine the the heat that is generated in the pumps for the thermal model. Finally, here we present the voltage model that in this case, as can be seen, it helps to analyze the voltage drop between the cell terminals. And as I said, we not only use the open circuit voltage with the use of the Nernst equations, but we have used and we have considered other effects, so as for example, the different overpotentials in terms of activation, concentration, and ohmic overpotentials. Another important fact is that as we in our electrochemical model, it considers the evolution of the hydrogen ions in both parts of the system. It is possible to introduce to the Nernst equation the Donan effect, as can be seen on the right figure. The inclusion of this effect is important because there exists a important difference with the typical voltage profile in terms of the shock, where the Donan effect is not considered. So, in order to validate this model, we have realized an experimental setup that has been carried out and developed in the LIFTEC Center. And in this case, we have assembled a monocell which is composed by a 7x7 centimeter square Campbell electrodes and an Aphion 117 membrane. The composition of the electrolytes are in a 2 molar solution of sulfuric acid with a concentration of 1.7 of vanadium. And we have used each 80 milliliters for each tank. For all experiments that we have carried out, we measure the voltage, the current, and the temperature in real time. So in order to validate the model, we have used an offline estimator, which is a parting transform optimization technique that can be easily implemented in MATLAB, and it helps to estimate the different parameters and initial conditions of the concentrations. In this case, the parameters that have been estimated are the initial species concentration, which are the vanadium species and the hydrogen ions, and the overpotentials parameters, where R is directly related with the ohmic losses and alpha and beta are related with the activation overpotentials. Here it is possible to see how the problem has been formulated using this system where we want to compare the estimated voltage with the real ones. On the right, we can see the profile that we have used to calibrate the model, which consists on a discharge cycle. And here we present the results that has been obtained for this discharging profile with a constant current of 3 amperes, where it can be seen how the calibrated parameters shows a good agreement between the real and estimated data. And then it is possible to obtain that the estimation of ohmic and activation of potentials makes it possible to obtain a correct estimation in both mid and high concentration periods. So in conclusion, we can say that this work presents a new dynamic model of a vanadium redox flow battery that considers the most important variables and effects and can be used as a tool for any user that wants to implement their proper experiments. In this case, it's divided in 4 different submodels that are related between them, as has been seen, and are the electrochemical, the thermal, the hydraulic, and the voltage models. And as I said, it has been developed in the MATLAB Simulink environment as a tool for people to use this model and develop their own experiments and analysis. This model has been validated with real experimental data using an offline estimator technique, obtaining promising results that has been used, and we are working on it not only in short time but also in long time, as can be seen in this figure, to calibrate the model for a high number of cycles, and in this way trying to calibrate, for example, the ion transport methods, as for example the diffusion, the migration, or the convection methods. And that's all. This research, it's part of the CSIC program for the Spanish Recovery, Transformation and Resilience Plan, funded by the Recovery and Resilience Facility of the European Union. and has also been support for the Spanish Ministry of Economy and Competitiveness under the Project Dovelar. And if you have any question,